Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of TLDR Addiction. Today I'd like to talk to you about the abstinence violation effect and why it might not be such a good idea to count days of sobriety. So in terms of sobriety days, while there's a long tradition of counting time, like a month, 6 months, a year, the issue with counting days of sobriety is that it's either a black or white way of looking at it. Either you've done it or you haven't, when in actuality, there's a lot of mid-ground that is worthy of celebration, and if you do, say, have a slip-up, something that we call a lapse, then it's not necessarily like you have lost 6 months of sobriety, you've lost a year of sobriety or more. Saying it that way, perceiving it as something that you've lost, feels like a lot more of a hit, like a gut punch, than I made a mistake and I'm going to rebound. So what happens is when if you're shooting for abstinence and you have an incidence of use, just one say, we call that moment the abstinence violation moment. And there is an effect, the abstinence violation effect, which is when you have that moment, when you then beat yourself up about it and you feel terrible and you feel guilty. And if you have an addiction to something, oftentimes if you beat yourself up about it, you tend to then use more to deal with those negative feelings, which creates a spiral which leads you into what we call a relapse, which is when you've gone back to using the way that you used to use before. In the grand scheme of things, a lapse can be a very minor bump if what you're shooting for is abstinence. If you have, say, like one drink, that does not have to be a huge life-shattering thing. That can be a moment where you say, wow, I just did something that isn't in line with my values. I'm going to deal with that now by going to a meeting, talking to your therapist, calling a healthy support in your life, any number of different things. The problem is that when you beat yourself up and you say, oh man, I can't believe I did that, I failed, I let myself down, what are people going to think? Or the F it principle as well, where, well, if I had one, I might as well have 20. That actually gets you into more trouble. And the idea of counting days rather than celebrating progress can actually make that worse. Because if, say, you have been drinking every day for the past 5 years, if you just strung together a period where for a year you only drank twice, and when you drank it was much less than you used to, that is fantastic progress. That is like night and day better than it used to be. And you have to walk that line where you're not telling yourself, well, it's okay to do things that are against my values. Or if you're shooting for abstinence, say, well, it's okay to have lapses. You don't necessarily want to promote it or allow it in that way, but what you can do is you can acknowledge the fact that mistakes may happen, that you may have these moments, and instead of beating yourself up, you can use that as an opportunity to fix the direction before things go in a much worse direction. So thank you for joining me on this episode of TLDR Addiction. I look forward to talking to you all again next week.